welcome to Her Moment. I am Sandra Kahumza. Now, today, I want us to briefly be very honest about so many things that happen in society. Many women accept and will say that it's very hard to survive in a male-dominated profession. But so many people have actually come up to say this is just a myth. I mean, I can work hard and achieve all that I want to achieve, just like the man or the men are doing it. So today on the show, we are excited because we have a wonderful lady, and she goes by the names of Cynthia Mpanga. She has not only survived in the banking sector, but has worked her way to the top of this industry. How she does it, I do not know, but you and I will find out in this episode of Her Moment. Welcome to the show, Cynthia.
Thank you very much.
I'm so happy to have you on the show today.
And I'm so happy to be here.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. So, I'm very excited. Every time I'm doing this, I'm super excited because I want to hear people's experiences and all that. So tell us briefly, who is Cynthia?
Okay, Cynthia is a humble, simple lady. I currently work with Standard Chartered Bank as the Corporate Affairs Manager. And I am the President of Public Relations Association of Uganda. I am a mother of 3, a mother to twins. Yes, I'm married, and I also serve on a couple of boards. I serve on the board of Private Sector Foundation. I serve on the steering committee of the UN Global Compact. I serve on the board of Educate, which is an NGO, and another board of Healing Point Uganda. So, in a nutshell, that's who I am.
You're so many amazing things, very amazing things. So tell us briefly, how was your childhood?
Well, my childhood was most of it, the most part I remember was mostly tucked away in boarding school, really.
Yeah.
I went to boarding school in P1.
How old were you?
I was 6 years old. So my parents...
In boarding school?
Yes, my parents packed me off at 6 years old. But I can assure you that everything that I am and everything I've become really is founded on my experience.
In the boarding school?
Yeah, because you're very young and then you have to fend for yourself, you have to look out for yourself, you have to be in charge of your life, to be in control of everything. Yes, I mean, you stop hanging onto your mother's sleeves and you have to sort of mature. So you plan your life, you organize yourself, you clean up after yourself. So it gave me the skills, and then you have to plan for your grab, you know what I mean? Because if it gets finished before visitation day, you're on your own, you're hungry, you're starving and so on. So I feel like going to boarding school really grounded me. Of course, I missed home, but I feel like I benefited quite a lot from being in boarding school.
So at that point in boarding school, at that age anyway, what are some of the challenges you faced as a young girl in school, in boarding school? Mommy, daddy, they're all not there. What are some of those challenges you faced?
I guess the biggest challenge for me was we had one visitation. Is going hungry. Yeah, you're waiting for lunch, like your life depends on it. And then, of course, I think my biggest challenge as a child, all you want to do is play, eat, and just be you. So it was just hard, and then it was just tough. I remember one time I had a cousin sister who was in primary 7, and one time at break time, I'm so hungry. I go to her, I'm like, I'm so hungry, I'm going to die. Like, I'm bent over, I'm so hungry. And then she's like, and it's an expression in Luganda which is so funny, because namgamba enjale numa nangamba nawe jirume. I will never forget that expression. Up to date, I was like, wow, how brutal. When you're feeling like you're turned inside.
But did you have like childhood dreams? Are there those things? You see, when we are young, you can say, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor. Like, you have all these different dreams. You as Cynthia, what dreams did you have?
Well, in primary school, I thought air hostesses were pretty cool. Yes, I used to see them in their uniforms on billboards, and you're thinking, this is it. But of course, when I grew up, then my dreams changed. In secondary school, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And of course, every dream is influenced by some situation. So, but yes, I thought air hostesses are pretty cool. And if I can be an air hostess, that would be so cool. Yeah.
So now moving on, but still on the childhood beat. So you're in boarding school?
Yes.
Which school was it?
I was in Chisubi Girls, and then I moved on to Ndeje Senior Secondary School. So I did my S1 to S6 in Ndeje, but initially the first years of my childhood, I was in Chisubi, then moved to Buloba Primary School for 2 terms. It was so tough. The conditions in that school back then was so hard. We used to wake up, go to do mchaka, you know. I was so skinny, so skinny. And I remember, like, in the morning you had to wake up at 5 to start, you know, the exercises, and the wind would literally blow me off, and we had to travel long distances to collect water to fetch water on our heads. Life was so tough, but I'm telling you, it was tough then, but it prepared me for who I am today, because even if I'm a very easygoing, soft person, I am very grounded within, and I'm not swept over, I'm not easily blown over by winds. I feel like I've been through.
Explains why you've managed to, you know, to achieve all that you have achieved right now.
Well, to an extent, because I mean, everything we are is influenced by several factors, and part of it is the environmental, our culture, our history, everything we have been. So I've been shaped quite a lot by that experience.
So what is that one memory you have of your secondary or high school life? Is there that one special thing that happened? Because high school, you know, you see, in high school, everything happens in high school. From making mistakes to dating to, you know, to failing, to repeating classes, everything happens in high school. So for you, were you a prefect in high school?
No, I was, one thing I was so good at was debating. I was the best student in literature. I was so good with literature. It's not surprising to most people that I turned out doing the job I do. It's sort of like something I always liked. In high school, I used to write actually for a magazine, and I used to write under a byline, and I had these fans. I used to receive letters and letters from fans, and I so enjoyed that experience. So I also used to write novels. In my school or high school, I would write in 96-page books and then bind them together, and you can't believe it, people were always waiting for the next novel. The problem is people would tear them into pieces, and then everybody's reading a little piece and so on. But as far back as I remember, I was always a storyteller. I remember every time we came back from holidays and then we were back to school, and people would say, tell us a story. So I would stand on top of the decker, you know, in your dormitory, on top of a decker, and everybody's sitting down, and then I'll start telling them stories animatedly, and then he did this, and then I'm so expressive, and then they kicked him, and then he did what. So I was always the storyteller, the writer. It sort of started at a very, very young age, and I was always very reflective. When my friends were always out playing, they would always call on me. My neighbors still remind me up to today. They would say, come out and we play. No, I was an indoor person, always reading novels. Always reading.
As a girl who was doing all these things in school, is there that one specific challenge that you faced that you felt could have been different?
Well, I did experience quite a lot of challenges. In primary school, my challenges were unique to the situations within boarding school setting. But in secondary school, of course, my challenges evolved. Now it was more of, I was in a mixed school, you know, and in mixed schools you have all sort of things happening. I was always considered like a nerd, sort of. I was nerd. Yeah, and I used to wear glasses. So you can imagine, very strict, wearing glasses, always reading, sort of like,
You're all to yourself.
yeah, I kept to myself. And then I was the best girl student in my school, both in S4 and in S6. So I was always competing with boys. So I was, if you could say, I was in the debating club. I was like the prim and proper, you know. So I think the biggest challenges I experienced were mostly to do with little things of boys disturbing you and whatever because you want to focus and do your own thing.
So now,
But yeah.
university. Which university did you go to? Mobs. How was it there?
Actually, my story is quite unique. When I left high school, my mother had passed away when I was doing my exams, my S6 leavers exams. So I was picked from school, went buried, came back when I was just going to start them. So I was completely disrupted and thrown off. And then my father died 8 months later when I was in vacation. So, and then I had all these dreams. Like I told you, as a nerd, I was always reading and all that. So what happened is I didn't get the course I applied for at uni.
What had you applied for?
I wanted to do mass comm, and the points were very high then, and I didn't get the points. So they gave me in Chambogo, and at that time, without parents, I didn't really have anybody giving me career guidance. I just never ever dreamed that I'll end up in Chambogo, not at Makerere University. So I didn't go, and I decided that I will work very hard and take myself through Makerere University and do the course I wanted. So I started doing odd jobs. I worked at a restaurant, and I remember my first day at the restaurant, I just walk in and say, I need a job. And then they gave me this job. And then at lunchtime, they told me to cross the road and go deliver food. You know, you've seen those women who cross roads with plates? Yeah. So, and then I crossed the road a couple of times, and then they said, you go now, the other side, there's a customer there. So then I crossed the road again, and the people I was serving said, aren't you Mpanga's daughter? Isn't this Mpanga's daughter? And everybody started saying, this is Mpanga's daughter. What is she doing serving in a restaurant? And I remember walking back, feeling so embarrassed to the restaurant and taking off the apron, and that was my first gig. So, but I went on to do other work. I used to work at Serena.
So did you leave that restaurant when people
I
did
left
that?
that day because, I mean, the hood, the neighborhood, and it's on Entebbe Road. And I grew up on Entebbe Road, so most people like there knew my father, and my father was a very prominent person, and so was my mother. So it was quite a bit of an embarrassment that I'm serving the same people who are like family friends and so on. So it was kind of tough, so I left that one. And then I started working for a lady who had offices at Serena, and she used to do training, all sorts of training for companies. So I would prepare her materials, carry her equipment when she was going for training. But she used to train in customer service, you know, thinking outside the box and all these sorts of things. So unfortunately, in second year, I dropped out because I couldn't raise the school fees. I'll never forget, we were about to do exams. I went everywhere, appealed, said I will bring the money, and so on and so forth. And nobody was listening to me. So I didn't do the exams, I dropped out, and I fell into a depression. I was so depressed. I spent like 6 months locked up in a room at my home. I'll just go, sleep, eat. If I got that energy, a complete depression. And I remember my parents were very, very wealthy. So we practically went from rags to riches when my parents passed on, because again, there were family wrangles.
Rather from rich to rags.
From riches to rags, yeah. So there were family wrangles and all these sorts of things, and property disappears, everything disappears, and somehow I was my mother's firstborn. So, but I do have siblings who are...
So talking about you being the firstborn, how many siblings do you have?
I have 3 siblings. I'm the only girl with 2 brothers, but I do have my half-sisters and brothers, and I have we are several of us, we are around 18, spread all across, amazing people. But then growing up, we used to be brought together, but we weren't always staying together. So in this situation, sort of everybody went to their parents, you get what I mean? So me now, I didn't have any parents, so we're stuck in the house. So going back to your earlier question, you asked, tell me about uni. So I have an amazing auntie of mine called Harriet Jackson, and I call her my guardian angel. So Harriet Jackson told me, now Cynthia, you've dropped out okay, you've gone through this whole depression thing, you've beaten yourself up, now what? She said, look around for a cheap some course and then I'll pay for you. So I went then Uganda Media Studies, and I studied a journalism course, which was 2 years, and she paid for it. So one time...
So meaning your dream all along was to be a journalist?
That's true. So when she gave me a chance, I just looked for a cheaper version of, you know, the same thing. Yes. So I did go through school then, completed, and I have my diploma in journalism. And then one day, Standard Chartered Bank was recruiting tellers. But remember, I mentioned that I used to work for a lady at Serena who used to do trainings for corporates and so on. So I hear Standard is recruiting for Mbale tellers, and they didn't really need a degree. All they needed was a diploma. Okay, and not a specific diploma. You don't need a specific diploma to do teller job. Yeah. So I went in there, and they started asking me scenario questions. You know how interviews are these days. They are not quite structured. It's not like do an exam in math or English, no. So they started taking me through this whole course and questioning and scenario question, hypothetical questions. So if a customer approaches you and they have a problem, how would you handle that? Remember, I was like doing training materials, writing down things, listening to companies, big people being trained. Now I'm here, and they were asking me the same questions. I lit up like a bulb. I was like so on top of that whole interview. I just went on and on. I was so ecstatic. They just kept asking, so if a customer is going through this scenario, have you ever been in a situation, you know, those scenario questions? And I forgot. And this interview panel was so intimidating. They were like Men in Black. You've seen that movie. Like all these mature, balanced people in black suits, you know, like 6 gentlemen, like all mature. And I'm really young and very skinny. And I'm looking at them, I was shivering the first time. But when they started asking me questions, I forgot they were even that intimidating and that big. And I just went on and on. So by the end of that interview, they were so impressed by how I interviewed. They decided they are not making me a teller. So they decided they are making me a customer service person. Yeah, and there was no opening. So what they did is they asked me to be a flow ambassador. And there was no position for flow ambassador. So what they did is they gave me a sash, you know, like a sash. And then they asked me to help customers walking into the bank, show them where to go, help them, make them feel comfortable. And I used to do that so delightfully. It was amazing. Up to today, I have friends, I mean, all over the industry that I made as customers, serving them then. So then the bank used to train me and put me on different desks. I served at the reception. I served at all the customer care desks, because they were training me on how to help customers and everything. So I did that for 1 year, and then there was an opening which I applied for, competed for, and then I moved into corporate affairs, brand and marketing, which is where I am now.
Oh, you mean immediately after that job?
After 1 year.
You became the brand manager?
No. After 1 year, so there was an opening in corporate affairs for a corporate affairs officer. And I applied for that role, competed with like 8 different people, very experienced people, I must say. And then I'm telling you, it's not even somehow, I did 8 interviews to get the job. It was so rigorous, all the way to the CEO to get the job. But I think what I didn't lack was confidence. I was like always a very confident person, and I always really informed myself. I didn't know the job, I didn't know what is required, but I did quite a bit of reading. Like I told you, I've always loved reading. So I did a lot of research and a lot of reading, and all these people had quite a bit of experience, but I had the attitude, the confidence, and the ability to really seek help, keep getting guidance and so on, and yeah.
I would imagine at that point there are males in the competition, I mean in this line of chasing this same job. So you as a person, did you ever feel intimidated by the guys?
Well, I think one thing
And again, did you feel like they were always favoring the guys to the girls, especially in this scenario?
well, I know where you're trying to get to, but the truth is Standard Chartered Bank really is a fair opportunity organization because it's an international bank. So it's not that they will give a guy easier questions or so on. An interview is an interview. You'll all be interviewed on the same scale.
Did you ever feel intimidated by the guys?
I have one thing that's worked for me, and I always keep my focus on the ball. I don't look at the noise around me. I don't focus on things around me. I don't focus on people. And I just know that I'm going in the eastern direction, and that's where I focus my attention. I don't get derailed by what I call noise around me. So I can't say I was intimidated, though there was this amazing person, lady, I remember she was called Jackie, I think now she's in the US. She was like the biggest competition. She had been sort of like training in the job, and she was very brilliant, she was very beautiful, she was so connected. I mean, at the end of it all, I went head to head with her for the rest of the interviews after everybody else had dropped off. And that was a run for my life, because I remember one of the things we were asked to do when we were all tying and they couldn't decide who was getting the job. They asked us to do like a 3.5 year plan for the bank on its corporate social responsibility programs for the next 3.5 years. And I remember I didn't have a car. Remember, I used to be downstairs on my feet the whole day helping customers, had no access to a computer and so on. So every time I finished working, I would go to the monitor offices. I had a friend of mine, up to now, I tell him, Angelo, you have no idea. You saved me. You know, I am who I am today because you contributed to that. So there is this famous journalist called Angelo, and he used to work in the Monitor. So every evening I would go and sit up in the Monitor offices, and I would read and research, and I read everything there is to know about sustainability, about corporate social responsibility, anything, and I started working on a plan. And then the day came when I had to submit it. I went with my flash disk, external flash disk, put it in, and guess what? Virus, lost everything. So life is not a straight line. It's like a struggle. You meet blocks and so on. And we had a deadline. Then the head, Harriet Mosoke, who is now the head of HR for DFCU Bank, said, by morning when I come,
I want everything.
so I remember I called the head of IT. I called everybody in IT for the bank to come help me. And again, there's another angel who I feel contributed to my journey in life. Some gentleman called Raymond. I remember he was home. He drove back to the bank and came, tried to help me and said, Cynthia, there's nothing we can do. You have to start afresh. The best thing I can do for you is restart this PC at the reception for you, and then you can start again. So I remember that night I called my little brother and I said, bring your car for me and park it outside the bank. So I started again. But because I'd done the research myself and I'd gone through the motions, it wasn't as good. The other one had photos, it had like well presented, but I had to start afresh. And I remember I just submitted like around 5 o'clock and then moved out. I was starting my leave and then went home. I didn't think I really stood a chance. So when I was on leave and then I got a call saying, please come and pick up your appointment later, I was like, oh wow, oh wow. I couldn't believe it. Like one of those moments, yeah.
So has that been your most amazing moment? I'm even carried away.
No, it's certainly not been my most amazing moments.
Because it was like so challenging for you, but you managed to actually go through it and, you know, achieve what you really wanted to achieve. So when they called you actually for the appointment, what was it? What was the appointment saying? That you've been, you know?
Appointed corporate affairs officer, which was the position I was vying for then.
So was it supposed to be one person or sort of what?
One person. Yeah, there was already a department of one person, so she needed someone else, yes.
So you were the best. Wow.
And I met all the way. Then the CEO was called David Cutting, a Black American, and I remember meeting him. But going back to your question of whether that was the most amazing moment in my life, I wouldn't say it was. It certainly has contributed so much to who I am, but it wasn't. I guess my most amazing moment in life, if you ask me, was having my children. Yeah.
Well, don't talk about children because I don't want to go there now. So moving on with your journey at Standard Chartered. So now you're appointed. You start doing the job. Tell us more about how you started, the challenges you faced as a person and as a woman doing a job that probably males would presumably say that they can do it better.
That's a myth right there, which I want to even dissuade. Women, from historically, we have always been managers in one way or another. And this is why I say that women always were in charge of homes. I mean, from way back, our grandparents and so on. So the notion that men are better than women is completely a myth. And today, now that we have so many women competing with men, and we are seeing the potential and the abilities of women and how they complement men, and there's this question, do women make better leaders than men? Because they're emotional, they have empathy. They will look at situations not just from a professional view, but from a humanitarian point of view. So I think the notion that men are better than women is completely wrong, and it's something we need to demystify as women. Truth be told, there's a glass ceiling, and we all know there's a glass ceiling, and men have been dominating these jobs for so long. And men have a way of networking that women, we can't comprehend. I mean, no, we can comprehend it, but the truth is, we juggle so many things. You are a mother, you are a wife. That's a full-time job. Yes. You are a wife, you are a career woman, you are looking after your parents or your siblings or so on. That, you know, you have to maintain your friends and maintain good relationships. You're juggling so many glass balls in the air, you practically don't have time. Every time you fall down, you're too tired to even do things that add value to you. Yet, on the other hand, your counterparts, they'll probably finish a job, go to watch a game, World Cup, and they will sit and talk and network. You don't have the liberty to do that. And most of these decisions that influence careers and things are not necessarily done in office settings. They are done in social settings. People will have discussions away from the office and discuss what's happening and so on. By the time you come in the boardroom, they are way ahead of you. You know, you are not part of the conversation. You're not part of the team. There's a team, and they get it. You don't get it. You're the outsider looking in. Having said that,
your biggest challenge as a person, as the corporate affairs officer at that point, what was that big challenge that you faced?
I think my biggest challenge, which is an ongoing concern, because truthfully, life is a journey. It doesn't stop. You don't say that, now I've overcome every challenge, now I'm fine. No. There is no such thing until you get to your destination, and we all know the destination is one. It's a continuous journey. Challenges never stop. They are just unique, and maybe you grow a thick skin. You learn how to manage, to maneuver, to be better. You learn how to make better decisions because you're repeatedly making these mistakes, or you know how to avoid them. But I think for me, the biggest challenge working in a corporate organization is always, the corporate politics, and, the whole, it's a dynamic environment. Every organization, no matter even if it's a shop and so on, stakeholder management, the politics within, the hurdles you have to overcome, and, there are all sorts of things. Now, I think in my day job, I handle media relations, and that means I speak for the bank, and that means that you wake up with a headline. I think things that keep me awake at night or give me sleepless nights is waking up to a headline, Standard Chartered
has done this, has failed to do this. Yes.
Yeah. That's where the crisis communication, you go into crisis management mode, because of course my first job is to protect the reputation of this institution. So it's always not a good day when some
A story has
bad
been
news things, and now today we have fake news that makes it even worse. And
Internet.
I mean, it has so many advantages, but the fake news thing, it's really a problem that I don't know how we are going to overcome. It's a 21st century problem that's come up with
And
digitization.
news moves
So
like
someone
so
can just
fast.
wake up
Yeah.
and just post something
the
without
internet?
thinking about it. And then it goes viral, and they're damaging a reputation you've built for 150 years, and they don't even think about the consequences of their actions. And it's okay, they'll hide behind the net because you don't know where it originated from. I find that is a very big challenge.
Okay, so you know, most of the women I've talked to, not necessarily on this show, but elsewhere, like in my daily life, they admit that while working or walking their way to the top, they face the challenge of being sort of manipulated by the guys who probably want to sleep with them. Did you ever face such a challenge as a young girl back then?
I mean, it's part and parcel. I mean, if you're a woman, naturally you have men get attracted to you. You know, it happens. I think the question is, as a woman, how do you handle that situation? Do you allow it to derail you? Is it by force? And if it's by force, that's sexual harassment. And any organization should protect ladies against, even men are sexually harassed, a lot of them these days. So then the question is there protection? But again, also people knowing their rights. Women today, truthfully,
Did you ever have a situation that was close to that?
men hinting on me? Yes. How I handle that?
Forcing, like trying to really make you uncomfortable in office? Did someone ever do that?
No. We have very, very strict rules against that. Not forceful. Someone liking you and trying to make a pass at you, that's like normal. Like, I mean, it's normal, right? It depends, but again, people can see that you're either, you know, someone who is approachable and is willing. Somehow women give out those signals. Not always. Sometimes it's forceful and most forceful, but again, if you put your foot down like immediately, but in a subtle, friendly way, because remember, you continue working with these people.
And you can't keep living.
You just have to be tactical on how you manage. I mean, if it's part of life, do you make enemies? Do you leave all enemies everywhere just because men are hinting on you? They like you. That's not your problem that they like you. Your problem is, do you accept them in your life, and how do you manage that situation? And I think that comes to what we call emotional intelligence. As women, you can't go, even men, you can't go so far if you don't have that emotional intelligence. You cannot actually tell from the signals before even the guy says anything. You can tell that this guy, and you can do certain things, behave a certain way that will sort of
Push him away.
just show there's a ceiling, there's a glass right there, and you don't, you know, tolerate. I mean, if you're going around flatty, jumping around, dressing funnily, bending up, I mean, what will a guy do? So you're encouraging that situation. Having said that, there are many situations where women do not encourage it, and it happens to them. And that's a story for another day. Yeah.
Thank you, Cynthia. I could listen to you the whole day, but for now we need to go in for a short break, and then we'll of course come back to, we want to know your family life, because I heard you mentioned something about kids, so we want to get to know more about that. So guys, right now we've managed to actually get into the life of Cynthia. We now know the schools she went to, how she felt, the challenges she met along her way. But for now, we are going to go in for a short break. But when we return, we shall go on to understand her life family-wise, when she got married, and also the challenges she has faced and how she has managed to actually overcome them. Stay tuned.